Okay, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive is into a fascinating stack of sources that really challenges our most basic assumptions about something crucial, how we achieve mastery, and specifically, how we do it fast.
Right. The sources we're looking at present this incredibly counterintuitive idea. They push back against the conventional wisdom that speed in learning or skill acquisition comes from more effort, more data, or just plain rushing.
Exactly. They propose the opposite, that true rapid mastery emerges from a state of stillness and emptiness. It's a total paradox.
Hmm.
And our mission today is to really dig into why the sources say this, explore their arguments, and figure out what this means for you, for anyone trying to learn or apply knowledge effectively.
Mm-hmm.
What if everything you thought about speed and learning was actually maybe holding you back?
That's the core challenge right from the start, isn't it? The traditional view, which the source describes with that Korean phrase,
Learning fast and applying fast.
exactly. It sees the process as this linear race. You accumulate knowledge, you practice techniques, you build density.
And the source fundamentally questions this. It asks,
Mm,
what if learning isn't about piling things on at all? What if it's more like uncovering something,
yeah.
clearing away obstacles?
This is where the concept of starting from Ito, starting from zero, becomes critical. The sources argue that our existing knowledge, our preconceptions, are
The filters we see through.
precisely,
Yeah.
they can actually be the primary barrier. They stop us from truly absorbing what's new because we're fitting it into old boxes.
So it's not just about adding new information. It's actively about unlearning, kind of
Yeah.
letting go of what you think you already know.
Exactly. Clearing the slate sort of allows new information to land differently.
Okay.
And this leads to the first major paradox highlighted, this idea of, the quiet expert who absorbs calmly.
That really flips the script on the usual image, right? The frantic genius or the visibly striving master.
Totally disrupts it. It suggests the opposite. The quieter, the more still the mind, the higher its capacity for rapid, deep uptake. It's about absorption, not just effort.
Okay, stillness leading to speed. That still sounds pretty contradictory on the surface. How do the sources redefine these terms? Speed, for instance.
Well, they redefine speed not as sheer velocity, but as stillness in motion.
Stillness in motion, what does that actually mean in practice?
It's about removing internal resistance. Think about it. When your mind is quiet, when you're not fighting the information or imposing your will or your old ideas onto it, you move through the process effortlessly.
Ah, so the speed comes from the absence of friction, not from pushing harder.
Exactly. It's like gliding instead of forcing. The stillness isn't stopping. It's this internal state that enables effortless and therefore fast movement or absorption.
Okay, that makes sense. Less internal drag. And how about mastery? How is that redefined?
Mastery is shifted away from just being about output or production, doing stuff. It's primarily about receptivity.
Receptivity. Interesting.
Yeah. The true master in this framework isn't just someone who does a lot, but someone who is profoundly open. Open to receiving insight, feedback, the subtle cues of reality without immediately judging or reacting.
Receptivity over assertiveness. That feels like another challenge to the typical expert persona, the one who's always got the answer, always projecting.
It really is. It's a different model.
So where else do the sources see this pattern showing up? Do these ideas connect beyond just, say, learning theory?
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets really interesting. The sources draw what they call neural cross connections. They find echoes of this principle in surprisingly diverse fields.
Okay, lay them on us. Where are we seeing this?
All right, let's start with Zen Buddhism. The zero-point state they describe, it lines up very closely with beginner's mind, or shoshin.
Beginner's mind, right? Being open even when you know a lot.
Exactly. The core idea in Zen is that the highest form of understanding or absorption comes from approaching things as if you don't know, even if you're an expert. It's that emptiness, that lack of preconception that allows for complete presence and openness.
Right, because if you think you already know the answer, you stop looking, you stop listening properly.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Precisely. Then they pull in quantum mechanics. Bit of a leap, but stay with me.
Okay, intrigued.
They use the analogy of the quiet observer. In quantum physics, the act of observing can collapse a wave function, forcing a potential reality into a single outcome.
Right, the observer effect.
Yeah. So the source suggests that in learning, a noisy or assertive observer, someone full of preconceptions and judgments, collapses the learning field too early. They force interpretations and shut down other possibilities before they're fully explored. But a quiet observer, one who is still and receptive, allows for multi-potentiality to remain open longer. This openness to multiple possibilities, not jumping to conclusions, is key to rapid, flexible learning.
Wow, okay. So not forcing an outcome too soon. Staying open to different ways things could land or be understood. That's quite a concept.
It is. And physics gives us another metaphor, the absorption spectrum.
Okay.
Think about a sponge. When does a sponge absorb liquid best?
When it's empty, porous. Not when it's already full and dense.
Exactly. So mastery isn't about being dense with accumulated knowledge like a waterlogged sponge. It's about being open and porous.
Ah, so the source's definition of mastery is linked to that.
Yes, they define mastery as porosity to insight. It's not the volume of knowledge you hold locked inside, but your capacity to absorb new understanding effortlessly because you have that space, that openness.
Porosity to insight. I like that. Okay, what are machine learning? That seems like the opposite. It's all about processing massive amounts of data, being dense with information.
It does seem that way, but the source cleverly uses the concept of overfitting. An ML model that's overfitted.
Yeah, it gets too good at the training data, but fails on new stuff.
Exactly. It's like an expert who clings too tightly to the specific patterns they've learned. They're dense with specific knowledge, but they fail to generalize. They can't adapt well to new, unseen situations.
They're trapped by their own expertise in a way. Their lack of porosity.
That's a great way to put it. They lack porosity. So the best models actually incorporate mechanisms for, like, regular resetting or regularization. They prevent themselves from becoming too rigid, too dense with specific patterns.
And the source calls this?
Dynamic zeroing. It's a deliberate process of clearing out assumptions or reducing the weight of prior patterns to stay adaptable, to maintain that ability to learn.
Dynamic zeroing. Deliberately returning to that state of potential. That makes a lot of sense for staying flexible, for avoiding that overfitting trap.
It does. And finally, consider jazz improvisation. How do incredible jazz musicians play with such speed and complexity? You might think they're just thinking lightning fast.
My brain just freezes thinking about trying to do that. Seriously.
Right. But the sources suggest they're not necessarily thinking fast in that conventional calculating sense. They've trained to such a high degree that they can essentially empty themselves.
Empty themselves.
Yeah, their inner quietness, their glides becomes a channel. The music flows through them rather than being forcefully projected by them through conscious, frantic effort. The speed comes from being a clear channel, not a forceful engine trying to churn things out.
That's a really powerful image. Being a channel, not an engine. So across Zen, quantum mechanics, physics, machine learning, jazz, the sources are saying they see the same underlying pattern repeating.
Yes, exactly. They identify what they call a fractal echo of this principle, the same fundamental idea about stillness and receptivity enabling speed, just manifesting in different ways across different domains.
It's like nature repeating a successful strategy. And what are the key takeaways the source pulls out from recognizing this pattern? Can we summarize those?
Yeah, they boil it down to several key points. First, high learning velocity equals a still, non-reactive mind. The calmer your internal state, the less you're fighting or filtering, the faster and deeper your ability to actually absorb what's coming in.
Okay. Non-reactive, that's crucial.
Second, true expertise involves returning to the zero-point state repeatedly. Mastery isn't some static endpoint you reach and then defend. It's a dynamic process of constantly shedding assumptions, unlearning, and returning to that open, receptive state, like dynamic zeroing.
So you have to keep hitting reset in a way.
Kind of, yeah. Third point, receptivity is more important than assertiveness for integration. Being open to receive information, letting it land without immediate judgment, allows you to integrate it much more effectively than trying to force it into your existing framework or constantly asserting what you already know.
Letting go of the need to be right immediately.
Exactly. And this next one really gets to the heart of the speed paradox. Fast means resistanceless, not rushed. Speed isn't about increasing effort or velocity in the usual sense. It's about removing the internal resistance, the biases, the fear, the noise that slows you down. When there's no internal friction, things happen effortlessly and therefore rapidly.
Effortlessly fast, because there's nothing in the way.
You got it. And the final point ties it all together. Silence equals system reset equals high bandwidth input mode. Stillness isn't just passive quiet, it's an active state that resets your internal system, clearing the clutter and putting you into a mode where you can absorb information with maximum efficiency and speed, like opening up a huge data pipe.
High bandwidth input mode. And the source notes this isn't just theoretical. We see it in things like neural networks, meditation practices aiming to quiet the mind.
And also in peak performance states for elite athletes, right? That feeling of flow where things feel effortless, automatic, and incredibly fast, precisely because the conscious, striving mind gets out of the way.
Dead the zone.
hmm And this all leads back to the central crystallized insight, which they explicitly call a paradox. The true source of rapid mastery is a paradox. It begins in radical stillness.
Wow. Radical stillness. Okay, if that's the core idea, what are the practical implications? How do the sources suggest we actually do this? It sounds great, but how do you apply it?
Well, they distill it into two really clear, actionable statements. First, to learn fast, you must first be empty.
Be empty.
And second, to apply fast, you must first not resist.
Be empty, not resist.
Yeah.
It really comes back to that quiet sponge versus the noisy accumulator idea, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The source uses that metaphor directly. The quiet sponge, porous and open, ready to absorb, actually outpaces the noisy accumulator, which is busy trying to grab and hold on to everything, getting dense and slow and missing things in the process.
It's a very different image of effectiveness, and they end with one final metaphor, right? The one that really brings it all together.
Yes, it's a beautiful one, they say. Be like the moon reflecting sunlight, not a torch projecting light. Quiet, open, reflective, and brilliantly fast at absorbing the universe.
That's powerful. So you're not trying to force your own knowledge or effort outwards like a torch beam cutting through the darkness. You're being quiet, open, simply reflecting what is, and in that receptive state, you become capable of taking in everything around you with incredible speed and clarity, just like the moon reflects the vastness of sunlight.
It's a complete shift in perspective, isn't it? From force and accumulation and projection to stillness and receptivity as the actual foundation for speed and deep mastery.
So this deep dive into the sources really challenges our typical go-to strategy, especially when we feel under pressure to learn or perform quickly.
Definitely.
Instead of pushing harder, gathering more data frantically, trying to speed up externally. The path presented here is totally internal. It's about cultivating that inner stillness, that emptiness, that receptivity.
Yeah, the key takeaway is deeply counterintuitive but potentially transformative. The path of resistance-less emptiness, of being the quiet sponge or the reflective moon, is paradoxically the fastest way to deep learning and mastery. It's about mastering your internal state first.
Which leaves us with something really interesting to ponder, doesn't it, for you listening?
Yeah.
The next time you face a challenge where you feel that pressure, got to learn this quick, got to apply this now, how might you pause? How might you intentionally try to be empty?
Or how could you consciously approach that situation by focusing on not resisting, not fighting the difficulty or forcing your preconceived notions onto it, but just allowing things to unfold without that internal friction?
What happens if you try being the quiet, reflective moon for a bit instead of firing up the projecting torch?
Yeah, what might change?
Something to experiment with, for sure.